Although this talk is for a caregiver presentation, I think the best way to start is to tell you my background and my family, and then within the story you can understand the whole ever-changing role of a caregiver. So our journey started actually in 1983 with my brother. He was 30 years old. He was suffering debilitating headaches and ended up in the ER. With the blood pressure sky high, they ordered tests, and he was diagnosed with metastatic pheochromocytoma and passed away 2 years after his diagnosis. Not much was known about the disease. It was called the 10% disease, which was, when I saw that, that was like, that's what they told us, and that he had everything against him. They said it could be hereditary if anyone else in the family would exhibit symptoms. At that point in my life, I knew it was cancer, and it had something to do with the adrenals, but pheochromocytoma was not on my word list. In 1996, my son, Danny, was 8. He started having episodes of abdominal pain, sweating, flushing. The effects of his episodes would put him down for 24 hours. I would take him to the doctor constantly and explain what was happening to him. The response was always the same. Who's picking on you, Dan? You having someone in school picking on you? Same thing every time. His diagnosis was psychosymptomatic. So this went on for 3 years. In one particular episode, I picked Danny up from school after his first class, which was gym. And it was quite early, so the doctor's office wasn't open yet. So I sat in the parking lot with Danny, waiting for the staff to come in, and we walked in right as they were starting their day. So Danny's episode was over by then, but he looked like hell, and he was real lethargic. I said to the doctor, look at him, this is not psychosymptomatic. He looked at Danny and says, who is picking on you at school? I said, so after that, that was the last time I saw that doctor. I found another pediatrician, and that in itself was a challenge since Danny has 5 brothers. I have 6 sons. I now had to send reports of all the boys to the new pediatrician, set them all up for new patient appointments. At Danny's new appointment, I explained everything to the new doctor about his episodes. He told me when Danny's having an episode, bring him on in. I want to check him out. So, of course, Danny goes a long stretch without having anything go on. And then they started coming, and at this point, he was having them very often. So I brought him in, and he was diagnosed with tachycardia, and we referred to a cardiologist. And this was 2000, so he was 11. We met our first hero, the cardiologist, Dr. Vijay Menon, and after taking Danny's blood pressure and performing an echo, he sent us directly to the ER of our children's hospital. His diagnosis was pheochromocytoma. At this point in my life, I had no idea what pheo was, even though I should have. And all I knew that it had something to do with the adrenals. The only reason I asked was because Danny's blood pressure was so high, and I remember my brother having the high blood pressure. He was very upfront and honest with me about how rare this disease was. He also knew that no one in Buffalo was experienced to operate on Danny, so he did the research and helped guide me through this terrifying time. But as parents, you have to be the strong ones, and you are the ones who have to navigate the ship. So we traveled 7 hours to Cincinnati, Ohio, to meet our second hero, Dr. Reichman. He removed Danny's pheo, and it was the size of 2 tennis balls. It was that, let me just go back, like years ago, he had an ultrasound that was negative. So it had to be there. That just came to my head, I don't know. It was then I started educating myself on the disease. My faith was still in the medical professions, but I read whatever I could on the pheo. Although at the time, by profession, I was a newer x-ray tech and I just started learning MRI, I didn't want to sound uneducated when I was talking to a medical team. Danny followed up in Buffalo with oncology for 5 years, and looking back on those years, Danny had 4 CTs within the first 2 years, but never had a 24-hour urine. After 5 years, Danny was released from oncology. He was cancer-free. The pheo must have been benign. In 2010, now Danny's 20, he was experiencing some severe abdominal pain and landed back in the ER at the same children's hospital. A CT of the abdomen and pelvis was performed, and an incidental finding of a lesion on his T10 vertebrae. When your 20-year-old stares at you with tears in his eyes and says, are they telling me that I have cancer again? I just put on my Superman cape, gave him the best pep talk I could, and without shedding a tear, I was like, I'm going to find a doctor. I'll be right back. So out the door I went. I found a little corner next to a vending machine and melted into a puddle. It was at that moment when I had a chance meeting with the same oncologist that told me his VO was benign. She just stared at me in my meltdown state and just entered the elevator. My faith in doctors, you could say, was a bit shaken. I was now going to be that mom who questioned everything that I didn't fully understand. And I found myself quizzing doctors, asking them questions that I already knew the answers to. But I wanted to make sure that they knew the answers too. Shortly after his hospital stay, we were looking for a surgeon to resect the tumor on his vertebrae at the advice of his new oncology team. So we made an appointment with one doctor, and they referred us to another doctor. And I let them examine Danny, give their opinion, and then I asked the question, how many VOs have you operated on? None? Okay. Next doctor. So now I got my researcher mom hat on, and I got to work and found a doctor at Sloan Kettering, another 7-hour drive. The neurosurgeon there had experience with VO para, and after a few visits and consult with the tumor board, they decided to radiate Danny's tumor. It was during this time that we met the genetics team. They educated us on different mutations that Danny could have that may have caused his VO. They tested him, and that is when the beginning of our SDHB journey. Of course, I knew I had the SDHB mutation since my brother had the disease. So back in Buffalo, I made appointments for the other 5 boys, my mom, my dad was now deceased, my niece, who is a daughter of my brother that passed away, my 4 sisters, and 2 of my brothers. I come from a family of 10 children. 2 of my brothers didn't want to be tested, and I was the organizer, getting everybody's insurance together, getting a hold of Roswell, our cancer center. They actually reserved a whole conference room for us to go as a big group. The results were that my mom, myself, my son Aiden, one of my brothers, had the SDHB, and then how genetic works, down the line, the children of whoever was positive, everybody got tested. At this point, we didn't know if this mutation came from my maternal grandmother or grandfather. It was at this time that my cousin on my maternal grandmother's side was dealing with breast cancer and was going through genetics at Roswell as well. So she told the geneticist she was my cousin, and could they test her for SDHB? She was tested, and bingo, also a positive SDHB. My mom's family on her mom's side is huge. My maternal grandmother is the oldest of 8 children. Her brothers and sisters had all medium to huge families. One had 14 children, another had 12, we had 10. The medium-sized families had 5 to 6 children. All those children had children, and now their children have had children, and our family tree is about 400 people. I was now the advocate for our extended family, and I felt it was my responsibility to give them the information on the genetic mutation. I got in touch with at least one member of everybody's family, and I forwarded them the information. I had them forwarded to their brothers, sisters, children. I even went as far to make a PowerPoint. I did. And I went, I invited everybody to my sister's restaurant for an informational meeting. 7 people showed up. So at that point, I thought, get off your soapbox, Ann, and if they need me, they can come find me. They know how to contact me. My number 1 priority had to be my boys, and back to mom mode and I stopped trying to save the world. While all the genetics was going on in Buffalo, Danny was still being seen at Sloan Kettering. It was then I had an aha moment. If the medical team at Sloan Kettering was so experienced in treating Fiopera, why haven't I met anyone with the disease? That was when the sleuth mom started the internet search. It wasn't easy. Now, you have to understand, I had just joined Facebook, and the only friends I had were like my friends, my real friends. Well, that probably came out wrong. But I actually, okay, so anyway, I'm an MRI tech. I run $1 million scanner that's all computerized, but I am no techie. It was through divine intervention that I stumbled across a Youku message board, and although I didn't know how to navigate through it, I figured out how to post a question. So my question was, where are all you people being taken care of, and who is your doctor? I waited, checking frequently for a reply, and there it was from a woman named Tuesday Monroe. The answer was NIH, Dr. Pachak, Karen Adams, email addresses and all. I immediately emailed both Dr. Patak and Karen, carefully striking each key of the keyboard to express how desperate I was for their help. I thought to myself, this could take months for an answer from such a big institution. The very next day, a Saturday, I had a reply, and the reply was, yes, we will see your boys. The wheels were in motion, I got everything they needed to them quickly, and we were meeting the FEO-PARA team within weeks. Our first trip to NAH was another 7-hour drive. I have to play that with numbers or something, I don't know. So my husband and I were off with Danny and Aiden while my mother took care of things at home. Once at the NIH, we navigated the large campus through security, the Children's Inn, and Building 10. This is when we met our biggest hero, Dr. Patak. That's when I'll cry. The days were filled with labs and scans, so Kevin and I divided and conquered so both boys would have someone to support them. I also carried a notebook. We all have notebooks, don't we? Okay, so I carried that notebook with me. I was the secretary, making sure everyone was there where they needed to be and protocol was followed. In every waiting room, we met somebody with a FEO. It was amazing. A very wise doctor has told me several times, if you have a rare disease, you go where it's common. Dr. Patak. Thank you for those kind words. Danny's visit was for his meds, while Aiden's was for screening. As we sat in the waiting room for the clinic, I was excited to finally get a direction that we needed. I had found a captain to steer my ship. When Dr. Patak came in with all the fellows in tow, I was so excited to finally get the answer. He had a plan for Danny, and he was going to follow him closely. Then he started talking about Aiden and that they had found a 2.5 centimeter retroperitoneal para on a CT scan, and the recommendation was surgery. My first thought was, how could I have missed this? Aiden's tumor acted so differently than Danny's. He had no blood pressure issues, no sweating, no abdominal pain. All he had was anxiety. His anxiety was so severe, he couldn't be in crowds, he couldn't go to concerts, movies, anywhere where there were crowds freaked him out to the point of vomiting. His anxiety interrupted his life. He was 14 at the time. I had even taken him to a psychologist to try to get him help. Never once did I think Theo and Para. I had so much to learn. Aiden had his surgery at NIH, and my husband and I stayed at the Children's Inn. On his second night after surgery, he calls me all upset. He tells me he's having a hard time catching his breath, and he was scared. So the sprinter mom and dad ran over to Building 10. And if you ever stayed at the Children's Inn, there are quite a few steps from the ground to Building 10. I was like Rocky. I was flying up those stairs. And when we finally arrived on the floor, the nurse was surprised to see us and was wondering why we were there. Aiden had never pushed the call button for the nurse, just the hotline to mom. Moms are always there to make things better. Aiden recovered and his anxiety went away. He now enjoys playing gigs with his band in crowded bars and venues. Now, Danny is 30 and Aiden is 24. 10 years since our first visit to NIH. My role as a caretaker mom has changed, but in the same way, it stays the same. HIPAA has been a big obstacle. Although I am on their HIPAA forms, I still get resistance from the gatekeepers at various doctor's offices. One such office gave me a hard time about making an appointment for Danny. The scheduler actually said sarcastically, he's 30 years old and you're calling for him? I was like, yep. I'm going to explain. Then I had to go and explain that he'll put it off till it's an emergency. He won't make any appointments. And so I make his appointments and I'll make sure he shows up. I imagine in his chart now we have a little note that says overbearing mother. I've been called worse, I don't care. So Aiden's anxiety is back, and could it just be anxiety? It could be, but Theo mom doesn't think so. The journey never ends, the frustration is real, and that is why I continue to educate myself and keep adding to the notebook. That's all.
Don't go away from the podium too quickly. Back to the podium. Just a couple questions. First off, I seriously am not joking. I'd love to see the family tree. If you could ever make one. I know it's I think we've talked before. How many people are positive in your family?
I'm telling you, only like a third has been even
even
Not
tested.
even a
But
third.
even those third is tested.
So
is that, like, get to the
my
mic.
mother, my niece, my sister, well, we have SDHC also. But for B, 6 cousins, 7 cousins, 15, 16?
15 or 16.
Yeah.
So that leads me to my next question. So are you finding resistance in your family to being tested? Because I am as well.
Yep.
And I'd like to know what your thoughts are about that. And then also, are you finding or have you found survivor's guilt of those people who are tested and are negative? So just to give you perspective, my family, I have 2 brothers and a sister. And of the 4 of us, 3 have the gene, 1 doesn't. And my one that didn't has a little more emotional issues, I think, because he doesn't. He feels guilty that he doesn't now that we do. And I wonder if you've had any experience with that and how you maybe have dealt with that in your family.
Well, since I have the gene, I feel none of my sisters have it. And I want, like, it affects the boys in our family, it seems more. But I sort of have, not resentment towards them, but I think, why did God give me all this to handle? There's so much, but I can't even see that they couldn't handle it. So I don't have any guilt on that. Sometimes I get ticked off that, I have to deal with it, but everybody has their issues, so.
How do you deal with those in your family that refuse or say that they do not want to get tested? You don't?
I don't.
Okay.
They have the information. If they want to do it, they can do it. I have to take care of, my little tribe.
So for us in our family, I will just say that since we're SDHD and my father had all sisters, it's a problem for us because they and their children are not going to see the disease present, but they can pass the gene to the next generation who potentially could. And it's an out of sight, out of mind situation for a lot of them. And I don't have an answer. I'm just making a comment that it becomes infinitely difficult to try to give them the information to lead them to the water to drink.
Well, I do want to say one thing is that, like, as far as our family moving forward, we were just at Memorial Day. We had a picnic in our yard, and Danny came over, and he's in a relationship with this girl, and he's like, and I said, oh, we're going to go on vacation August, and I'm like, is Jen going to come? And he's like, no, we're on like a different wavelength. I really care for her, but she wants kids, and I can't bring it forward any further. She wants like 5 kids. I don't want any kids. I don't want to bring this disease to anybody else. That makes me so sad. Like that, They won't. She's very religious. Danny should be religious. He was brought up that way, but hasn't seen the inside of a church in quite a long time. But her father's a deacon. They would never go for that. But that makes me sad that, I want a lot of grandkids.
So I just wanted to make one comment in response to Matthew. Many of the genetics teams, or I guess I can comment on me in particular, give my email or give contact information and tell the families it's not a commitment to do anything about it. Just, you can email and just talk about on the phone or whatever, just understand what the disease is or what it is we even want you to do. And sometimes that conversation can move them forward. But clearly your obligation is just to make this contact or this condition, make them aware of it, but you can't force them to take action.
Yeah.
I just want to know that many of us are willing to participate in that assistance.